that is a recipe for disaster. You're not going to be able to meet the needs of the customer. They're going to find other solutions and other options that do have empathy with them, that meet those needs, and take their business elsewhere.
Hello, my name is Adam, and I'm a CEO of Real Eye. So we're here today with Rob Volpe, empathy activist, author of Tell Me More About That, Solving the Empathy Crisis One Conversation at a Time. Also a founder and a third CEO of Ignite 360, an insight strategy and training firm. Hi, Rob. How are you today? Good to have
Good.
you here with
Hey,
us.
thank you, Adam. It's great to be here.
Great to have you here with us today. So let's jump to the hot topics. So we're going to talk about empathy today for sure, because that's your specialty. So can you tell us a bit more why empathy and how it all started with your
For
research about
me
empathy?
or for humanity in general?
Okay, actually, that's tempting. Let's go with the humanity.
All right, we'll start with humanity. Something that we're born with, actually. It is an innate ability. We're hardwired to be able to have empathy, to see the point of view, to feel the feelings of other people, particularly those that are closer to us in our kind of tribe or experience. And we are not the only animals that can demonstrate empathy. There's plenty of examples, if you look around, of other species, mammals and non-mammals, where they're practicing empathy with each other. Neuroscientists have found the parts of our brain that light up when we're practicing these two different types of empathy. Yet the term empathy itself wasn't identified. It was about 130 or so years ago, I think. And I think it got coined over in Germany and then moved into the English language. And it's become this big catch-all. There's a lot of different aspects of empathy. There's cognitive empathy, emotional empathy. And partly because of that, partly because it does have that sort of soft skill EQ side to it, it's actually something a lot of people are hesitant or unsure or have a lot of misconceptions over.
Okay. And what about empathy versus uh, mm, compassion? That was actually a question from my co-founder who wanted to elaborate a
Yeah.
bit about that.
So empathy, if you think about empathy as seeing the point of view of somebody else or feeling what they're feeling, because there are those two different types, once you have those, it enables you to do all these other things. And compassion is a very natural, immediate reaction to having empathy with somebody. If you see that somebody is in need or that somebody is suffering, you are motivated to do something about it. And that's to have compassion. There's also, kind of newer terms that have been coming out related to that. So if you think about the wars that are going on in the Middle East and in Ukraine right now, it's really upsetting for people. And over here in the United States, there's a lot of concern, but people don't know exactly what to do. And it's actually a term called empathic distress, where you can see that somebody is suffering and in need. You want to act, you want to make a compassionate act or gesture, but you just don't know what to do. You don't know who to, I don't know anybody that lives in Gaza or lives in Israel at this point. Like, what do I do? And so working through that is a challenge for a lot of people. And so what ends up happening is we all get outraged and upset, and we go on social media and yell and scream because it's the only thing that we can do right now. So there's empathy. It leads to compassion. It also fuels all these other skills that you use: communication, decision making, problem solving, ideation, persuasion. Empathy is fundamental to all of those things. And the more you're able to utilize empathy in those skills, the better you're going to be in whatever role in marketing research, marketing, and so many other fields.
Okay. It sounded like compassion is something more automatic, more on the behavioral level, and meanwhile, empathy is something that you can work on. Therefore, I assume that it's also this kind of like cognitive empathy, like you mentioned. So,
Yeah, generally. I mean, I think self awareness is key for everything. Like just understanding how we're showing up and the actions that what we're feeling or sensing, what we're thinking, where those things are coming from, and where they might take us. So, yeah, you might overhear um, in the United States, there's always these ads trying to get people to donate money to, help different causes. It's often animals,
Mhm,
and they show pictures of really, cute puppies and kittens that have some injury. They came from a puppy farm. They've been abused, and it really tugs at the heartstrings. So there's a compassionate response to that. You're like, oh, I want to help them,
mhm,
and you'll be motivated to possibly donate. That's how you can actually help them rather than go into empathic distress. Like they give you an outlet for how to actually help, for less than a cup of coffee
mhm,
every day, for less than a Starbucks latte, you can help these animals out and just, go to this website, scan this QR code, and we'll take care of that.
mhm. And while we're here at the topic, so are there any tricks? What basically can people do to be more empathetic uh, starting today, let's say?
Oh, I got lots of tricks up my sleeve.
Top three or top one,
Oh, top one. I mean,
top two.
so, well, okay, let's talk about my book for a minute.
Mhm,
Tell me more about that, solving the empathy crisis one conversation at a time. In the book, I outline and talk about the 5 steps to empathy, and so those are the things that you need to be aware of, or everybody needs to be aware of in the moment, in order to get to a place of empathy with other people. So you're having a conversation, whether it's a loved one, your neighbor, a stranger, a colleague at work. You have to be mindful to dismantle your judgment. You've got to ask good questions. You've got to actively listen. The 4th step is integrate into understanding. That's making room in your head that there's different points of view. It doesn't mean that the other person is wrong. It also doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but
mhm,
it's making room and getting curious about, well, hey, what's going on? Where's that coming from? And then that 5th step is using solution imagination. And so this is where you take things and you turn it around and start to apply what you're hearing in order to take the conversation further, get to a deeper level of understanding. You start to actually practice some empathy. So I think, the biggest tip I would say is to check out the 5 steps to empathy, and start to understand that. And I could keep going. I've got other things I'd like to share, but that's where I would start
Okay.
first.
Okay. Thanks for that. Uh, okay. Let me go back to the list of questions that I've prepared. Then, so basically, this series of interviews is about market research trends in market research, and so on. So, let's talk a little bit about the empathy and how it is connected to the market research, and how dangerous is not using empathy while doing market research. Perhaps some examples from a real world.
Yeah. So the absence of empathy is a self-centered viewpoint. I mean, the people that can't have empathy or are unable to have empathy typically are on the antisocial disorder spectrum: narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths. And that's about 10% of the population. Um, common complaint about a narcissist is like it's all about them. They make it all about themselves. They're manipulative. They're doing whatever. So let's put that into context in the business world. Imagine if your brand or your business that you're working on was a narcissistic business
Mhm,
where they made it all about themselves. They manipulated the consumer or their customer, and they weren't understanding where the consumer was coming from. That is a recipe for disaster.
mhm,
You're not going to be able to meet the needs of the customer. They're going to find other solutions and other options that do have empathy with them, that meet those needs and take their business elsewhere. So it's really critical. And when you are sitting in that marketing research seat, um, the archetype that I think about for who the insights function is, if you think about the idea of the court jester, and a lot of times people think court jester, oh, they're making jokes and doing things. But if you really read into what the court jester does, the court jester is always delivering messages, and they have the ear of the king, the person that's in power. So that would be your CEO, that could be your marketing director, whomever it is, and they're whispering, the jester is whispering into the king's ear, telling them what's really going on. That's exactly what the marketing research function does. In order to understand what's really going on, you need to have empathy. You could make things up, but then it's going to be that sort of narcissistic perspective, or it's going to be a flawed perspective. So you need to use empathy to really connect and understand. So from qualitative research is all about empathy and connecting with other people. That's, just really being open to what you're hearing and then taking that and representing it in a report or the things that are going up to the king's ear, so to speak. On the quantitative side, you still need to have empathy because, quant is just data, and data on its own doesn't have meaning. You've got to find the story. And to find a compelling story, you need some empathy, not just with the consumer, but also with your audience, and understanding, like, well, what are their needs? What's the decision that they need to make? How do I craft this story so that it's going to be clear and compelling to motivate or inspire them to take action? So you're actually having empathy in both directions. I actually believe for the anybody that's working in insights or marketing research, and if you're on the client side in particular, you have this it's this added level of, like, it's like jujitsu. Like, you've got to be dealing with the consumer, the customer, the respondent, the research participant, but you've also got to have empathy with your stakeholders and help them have empathy with those consumers directly. And if you can build that up, it's going to improve their intuition, which is going to improve their decision making, the speed at which they're able to do things, the confidence at which they're able to do things, and all of that is going to lift the results of the business.
Okay, so in theory, having a typical qualitative researcher, let's say with just slight of empathy, versus a qualitative researcher with like pretty extensive level of empathy, would mean that we would probably get two types of results when we are, let's say, ordering such research within two of them, and probably the more valuable will be the one who gets easier into some other people's shoes to understand their decisions, their decision making process, and so on.
Yes, and is able to bring that to life to the stakeholders, and bring it to life in a way that's clear and compelling. Now, saying all of that, I'll give the watch out to all of this. You can be, and I'm sure people know the person in their life that's highly empathetic and might be driven more by the heart than marrying up the head, the data, with the heart. So what you're looking for in a business environment, and those people have a superpower. It's a real gift. If you are one of those people and you're listening, the thing for you is to understand your power and understand the boundaries and how to use it for good that's going to benefit yourself and serve you, as well as serving other people, without letting it drain you, take you astray. You still need to be able to be the jester and make the wise decisions, and share wisely, but you don't want to have it just be the heart. It's not so back to that analogy I was using about the commercials looking for donations to support the poor puppies and kittens. That's really tugging at your heartstrings. And there are so many cases where you see somebody that's suffering and you want to help them. And so you act compassionately. If I gave everybody $100, there's only so many different causes or places where I can make that donation. So I have to actually use data, knowledge,
Hmm.
wisdom in my head, rational thinking,
Right.
married with, it's like, okay, there are people suffering. I have privilege. I'm able to contribute and help. What can I do? What's my budget? What's the limits to what I can do reasonably? Because I need to be able to continue going so that I can do more good works. So
Hmm.
I don't want to just put myself into debt immediately trying to help everybody all at once.
Right.
What are the boundaries? Choose the cause that I believe in and then make the decisions on how I'm going to help. So when you're going in the real world situation, when you're going in and talking to, whomever the marketing, say you're in a marketing research role, you're going to talk to the marketer, you want to say, people really love this cereal and they really have this strong emotional bond. And I really feel for them. They are suffering right now because of the high prices that are due to inflation and production costs going up and transportation costs going up, all the things that have led to prices going up. We really need to just give them, a break and cut our cereal prices by $2 a box. You're going to get laughed out of the room because the reality is you still have a business to run.
Hmm.
And so what you want to do is say, hey, so understand, like, your marketer, whoever's your business manager in this scenario, they're still looking at the bottom line. They've got their goals to meet. They've got volume and revenue sales numbers that need to be met. So the persuasive conversation is saying, hey, let me tell you the story of this one consumer that I talked to. And they represent a lot of different people. We've seen it in our data. Like they're 60% of the audience of cereal consumers right now. They want to be eating more cereal, but it's really expensive at the supermarket. And so they're having to choose. They're either trading down, going to a lower price, or they're doing something else. But they love our brand. They want to experience it more. They want the joy of having that sweet cereal in the morning, as well as that taste and all the things that go with it. So how do we create opportunities for them to dip in without giving the product away? So like what I've done is I've changed it into, I've married some business sense. Like, okay, I know I'm recognizing we can't give this away, but I'm sharing a story and I'm using the story of an example, and allowing a connection maybe to one person. And you could add more details. You could say, oh, there's this woman, Jen. She lives in Georgia. She's a mom of 3.
Hmm.
Money's a little tight. They're working class. They don't make a ton of money, but they love sweet cereal. She grew up on it. She believes in it. Big champion of our brand. But they're suffering and they're struggling and they're not able to buy it as much because they're having to make trade-offs. And she's choosing that she needs to put the money towards meat for dinner versus sweet cereal for breakfast. So what are the things that we can do? Like when you start to put those little human elements into it, you can start to imagine who the person is, and that helps the other person create that connection. And go, oh, I get it. Yeah, I understand who that person might be. And yeah, we should do something to help them. And let's figure out how we can maybe do a price reduction, and that'll
Hmm.
boost our volume. Let's test it and see what it'll do. And then maybe we can figure out how to kind of roll it out. Um, so that's on the spot made up example of empathy in action, and how the marketing research function might be that,
Hmm.
wizened court jester whispering in the king's ear.
By the way, it's an international cereals day today. So just out of out of context. Yeah.
I didn't
Uh,
know that.
yeah. Anyway, so what you were saying is kind of like taking data, taking quantitative pure data, and marrying it with a story of individuals, kind of like creating these personas in the center, like you mentioned, the human element that can bring some light to the actual problems that lies within the numbers of products being too expensive, what does it mean for the
Exactly.
consumers, and so on.
And there is a storytelling technique called the story of one, which is what I was just using, where you use the story of one person to represent the many.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard for us to wrap our heads around the fact that, the last number I heard was that 30,000 Palestinians had been killed since October 8th, after the October 7th attack. That's a massive number. It's like I don't know, that's like my whole neighborhood getting wiped out here in San Francisco. And it's hard to imagine that. But then when you start to hear the story of one individual person, which might be the child that was suffering, or was, the infant that died at the hospital because the hospital lost power, you feel that in a totally different way. But then you link it back to, and they are one of 30,000 people that have died since October 7th. All of a sudden, you're like, oh yeah, we got to do something. I'm helping all of these people on behalf of that, but inspired by that one particular story. So, if you've got, okay, here we go, we got all this quant data, what do I do with it? Well, it's finding the story. The easy way out is just to put a table, or different graphs up on a slide and show all this information, because there's a common misperception that everybody's a data junkie. If you're in research, if you're drawn to quantitative and trying to figure out that puzzle of like, what's the story in the data and where is the interesting thing, you might have a default of sharing a little too much data, and because you geek out over it, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you have to be wise and have empathy with your audience, understand what their needs are, the decisions they're trying to make. Maybe put that graph, that eye chart in the appendix, and instead pull the information that tells the story and tell the story. And then if somebody says, well, how did this compare to blah, blah, whatever? Oh, hold on. Let me flip to slide 65 and show you and go into more detail. But it's about having empathy with your audience, finding the relevant details that tell the story, reinforce your point, and inspire action. If you can, and it's not always possible, but if you can find the qualitative, because not all projects have a qual and a quant component yet, you probably know who your consumer is. You may have verbatims from your customer service. You may have an NPS survey and it's got customer service open ends or something, or the customer service team is talking to people. You probably have some data that you can use to help tell the story. You just have to put it into context. Like, you know what? We heard that 6 out of 10 consumers believe cereal is too expensive, so they're buying less of it. And here's a couple of verbatims that I got from the customer service team where they were hearing from consumers saying, yeah, it's too expensive right now. And then suddenly you've got this added depth to your presentation, because there's a human voice in it, and it's bringing the data to life, and it's helping you. If you can have empathy with the consumer, you can also put yourself in their shoes. Think about a time when, it may not be a box of Cheerios, but Adam, what's something that, you've wanted to buy more of, but it's just a little too expensive and you can't buy it as regularly. And, cereal is like an everyday food. It's not a Rolex, so you should be able to buy it with more regularity than that. Put yourself into their shoes. Try to imagine what it might be like to be that person. Like, look at that data, turn it around and put yourself into the consumer and go, what's going on where they might be feeling this way? That's going to give you, again, that added richness in your analysis. And you want to make sure you're not going out on a limb, try to back it up with other data points, but it'll help you start to build your intuition.
Thanks, Rob, for this interview today, and have a good day. Have a good rest of the day.
Awesome, Adam. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for listening.